Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is Cheryl Frances-Hoad. Cheryl is a British composer, and I'm looking forward to having a lovely conversation about music and other things. Cheryl, great to get you on. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Yeah, I'm very well.
Enjoying the summer?
Um, yeah, when I can stay inside in the cool, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for coming on. I just said briefly off camera that I've been keen to get a composer on for a while because I'm a huge f fan of music, and I'd like to further on in the discussion just get into a bit how you put your music together. But first, perhaps a little bit about yourself, Cheryl. Were you always a music fan? Just tell us about life as a young Cheryl.
Um, yeah, well, I've never really known anything different, actually. My mum's a flute teacher, so I grew up sort of sitting in the corner of the room while she taught when she couldn't, when nobody else could look after me. So I don't remember not doing it. I don't remember not reading music. And yeah, she thought that I might be have there might be something in it for music for me when apparently I'd used to, I mean, this is awful, but when I was little, when she would do oral exercises with her students, I would sing them back first, when I was a sort of toddler. So she really encouraged me. I learnt the recorder, the flute, and then the cello. And then when I was 8, I went to a specialist music school. So I've never known anything different. Yeah.
Yeah, been a complete way of life for you.
Yeah. Um, I mean, the amazing thing for me about music now is that it's broadening my life in ways that I would have never imagined. I've just written a piece about plant biology for the 25th anniversary of the Gregor Mendel Institute. And having gone to a music school and done 6 GCSEs and 2 A levels, a lot of which were music. Um, I gave up science when I was 12 or 13. So I didn't even do GCSE. But then last November, I was out in the Gregor Mendel Institute being told about this cutting edge research by these biologists. And it's just amazing how music is broadening my life in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to come back to that in a few minutes, but can you recall as a child the kind of the pieces of music that were inspirational to you, even as a young child? When I was a kid growing up, classical music wise, I remember a song that was in the charts by Ennio Morricone, Key Mai, and it stuck with me, and it's a song I still love to this day. Was there
Yeah.
similarities for you?
Yeah. Morricone is great. I mean, so I started playing very young. The earliest I remember a piece by Benjamin Britten that I played when I was 8 called Tema Sacher, and it was a really short 1 minute piece that had been written in honor of the conductor Paul Sacher, and it translated the letters of Sacher's name into music. And I remember playing. It was quite a crazy piece, and it was really difficult for me. But I really remember clearly having this kind of light bulb moment that, oh my goodness, people who he wasn't alive. Benjamin Britten was dead by then, but people who are alive recently write music, and I can write music and all that kind of stuff. A lot of other stuff. I got off the telly actually. I can't. I wish I could remember what advert it's for, but I remember Take Five on a car advert, and I remember just dictating that, and it took me. I mean, it must have taken me like a month to do it, to wait to hear the advert every time. And a lot of my house is very classical, so a lot of other kinds of music I've discovered through the telly and would write down on manuscript paper and things like that. Yeah, but
Were your parents always kind of intent that you were gonna go into music? Was there ever any teenage angst or kickback, or was it always kind of no? Yeah, I'm going with this.
no, I mean, my mum's, well, my mum said that I think my mum would have to persuade me to stop practicing. I mean, it's crazy to think about it, actually. I was painfully shy as a child, to the extent that people thought there was something mentally wrong with me. And um, I basically I didn't really speak much, but I would just fill up p manuscript books with paper, and I never had I never had any nerves playing. I developed them later when I was 15, sort of around that age. I got crippling stage fright, but I'd never had it till then, and that was the point that composing really took over for me, I guess. Yeah, yeah. So yeah.
And tell us what it was like. I mean, my father is dead now, Cheryl, but he was a huge fan of Yehudi Menuhin, and he was always being played in the Frost residence to go and study and be educated at a place like that. Give us a flavour of what life was like at the school.
Yeah, so when I went there, there were, I think, 38 kids from all over the world from 8 to 18. There was only me, Caroline, and Hannah who were 8, and then the other people seemed really old to me. They were like 11 or something. Um, we'd get up and do an hour's practice at 8 a.m. The day would finish, I think, at 6:30, and we'd have practice built into it, so 4 hours or something of practice. And then we'd have other subjects. I mean, it was because it was a small school. I was really lucky that there were small class sizes. Um, but I had 2 hours of cello lessons a week. That's what I wanted to be when I was younger. I wanted to be a cellist. So I had 2 hours of my first study. I had an hour of composition in a group, and I had, I think, half hour of piano a week. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing going away when you're 8, I think, from home. I have this very strong memory of it was like a family when there were 38 kids there. I have this very strong memory of on a Sunday night when my mother was driving 2 hours back home. She would come for the first year, she'd get me every weekend. So she'd drive 2 hours there, 2 hours back on a Saturday and do the same on a Sunday in this kind of knackered old metro. Um, and I remember the other students like throwing a ball on the field for me to sort of distract me, when I was. So I found it really hard to begin with. But I mean, for me, the main thing is that in those days it was grant maintained. So the first few years, I think, did not cost me anything because of my family income, and yet I had this education that money just couldn't buy. I mean, it was cheaper than feeding me at home, except maybe for the petrol, maybe, I guess. Um, so it just gave me opportunities that I could have never have dreamed of any other way. And now I look back on that. Now it's worked out for me. I think all the things that I lost out on and I've possibly had to try and sort of rectify in my brain, have been worth it. You know,
Mm.
I think for people for whom it's not, I yeah, it's an interesting yeah.
Was it a competitive environment in any way? I mean, when you've got these proteges from across the world who have clearly got a talent, otherwise they wouldn't be there. Was that competitive nature good for you, or was it detrimental in any way?
Um, yeah, it was incredibly competitive, and we would sort of compete to who could practice the most at the weekends. I mean, it's kind of like, um, I think, I think, I don't know, I was like a fat ginger kid who was into music. So I mean, like, God knows what my life would have been like if I'd have been in a normal school, right? So, um, I think I would have been. I think I would have been. I don't know. It's a difficult. I think it was all worth it, basically. I think probably was very detrimental in some ways. And I'm only feeling. I mean, I'm 44 now, and I only kind of feel that I've sort of shed some of the negative things about it now. But I guess that's very telling of my psyche, right? That I kind of, because it was all means to an end, and now I'm doing what I want to do in my profession, that it's
Yeah.
worth it, right? Um, yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned the cello there for anybody who's interested in the cello. Stephen Isserlis has been a recent guest on the Godcast as well, so do check that out. But did you find I suppose what I want to ask is when did you feel the move from being I nearly said just being a musician, I don't mean that disparagingly, but from being a musician to a composer, did that happen at the school or was that something that evolved later?
No, so I think again, I can't remember not writing music. I would sort of, noodle around and try and write things out from when I was really tiny. Um, the great thing about school was that I could write for my friends. So I wrote a string orchestral piece when I was 8. And yeah, it was a very hard lesson because in the days when you would copy everything out by hand, I'd miscopied some bars rest. Um, and the conductor said, "Sorry, we can't do this," and just threw it out. So, and my mother had come down to hear this rehearsal, and he was quite sort of mercurial, and so that was a good lesson. Um, but when I was 14, I entered the BBC Young Composer of the Year, and I wrote a cello concertino, and it got selected. And so when I was 15, the BBC Philharmonic performed this work, and I do remember. I can remember it like it was yesterday, being in front of this um, orchestra and thinking, "That's it. That's the moment." And yeah, it's kind of really it sends tingles down my spine even now. I
Yeah, the only thing I can relate to, I used to write stand-up comedy, and I wrote some for I'll not say the person's name, but it was a famous comedian, and I went to see him perform some of my material at a packed theatre in Manchester, and I remember as it moved to my bit, it was like wow,
Yeah, yeah,
and as you say, it's like whoa, this is just wonderful, and nobody in the room knew who I was, and but for
yeah,
me, it was a really special moment.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I need to ask Cheryl because I am a huge lover of music, probably more in the contemporary world. I love electronic synth from the 80s, like bands like Depeche Mode, those kind of things. But and I'm really curious that when you start a project, where do you start the project? So if you're given uh, a theme, so I noticed that you were invited to write something for Nine Lessons and Carols, weren't you? Where do you start a project like that? Bearing in mind, there's a lot of good stuff already out there in that genre and that area. Where does it start for you?
Yeah, wow. Well, that for that piece specifically, or
Well, that and more generally, yeah. Does it
yeah.
start with an idea? Do you kind of make a few notes? Does it start at the piano? Does it start with a picture in your brain?
So I mean, for that, for the nine lessons and carols, I mean, that was sort of extra pressure. How did I start? I mean, I think I still so with choral music or vocal music, mostly I think I start with text. Um, or perhaps the people who are commissioning it. I mean, I'd watched Nine Lessons and Carols every year of my life, so I really sort of, I'd heard the choir a lot.
Hmm.
It was trying to find a text that really appealed to me. There are all so many other things at play with that particular commission because I mean I'd be lying to say if I said I didn't want to write something that would sort of be popular, and I also looked at the sort of previous year's carols, and also I've written a lot of Christmas carols, and I realized I hadn't really written the slow one, so there's all this kind of like slightly sort of strategic stuff going on as well. But the text, um, I did many versions of that carol because I wanted to write something as simple as I could. I mean, I think it probably didn't turn out as, I don't know whether it's other people's idea of simple, but I wanted to distill something down to something as simple and as beautiful as I could in that instance. And I did a lot of I asked a lot of questions of the director of music there, Dan Hyde, about, ranges, and yes, being really, really careful to make sure that I really wrote really well for the singers in that choir. Um, but usually it's sort of usually if it's involving a singer, it will involve a text. Perhaps it will relate to what's already in the program. So I'm setting this medieval medical recipe at the moment for a singer, and the rest of the program is sort of fairy tales and things like that, and legends. So I wanted to find something sort of the same but a bit different. Um, with instrumental pieces, it will often be a landscape or a painting or a poem. I tend to sort of store things up in my brain. If I see something that I find inspiring and I think, aha, that will be something, that will be something in the future. And then I noodle around on the piano, basically.
Well,
Um,
I was going to ask, where does it begin with
yeah,
an instrument, usually at the piano?
yeah.
Yeah. But
But
as you build that, Cheryl, I mean, I'm, I live in a certain world. Somebody like Gary Barlow, who's composing a pop song.
yeah,
He jumps on the piano, doesn't he, and writes a million love songs or whatever it is. With you, you're not just you're building sounds, aren't you? So you've got all the various instruments that might be in an orchestra. Just how do you do that? I'm so fascinated to learn. Where does the other music join in? I can imagine for me this would take years, but
I think it probably does take years, and it's just sort of like an endless feedback loop.
yeah,
Because if I'm so I've just written something for choir and orchestra, and I definitely had. I knew the bits that, say, okay, that bit's going to be wind, that's going to be brass, that's full orchestra. And I had, perhaps that's in response to the text.
yeah.
But I was also playing it on the piano, but so I've got this sort of endless loop going on, saying, I am playing the piano, but this is actually playing another instrument, so I have to think idiomatically for that instrument. I think I think it just takes I think it just takes a lot of time, and you just gradually build these sounds up in your ear. You gradually learn what works well on certain instruments. There's a lot of stuff you can get out of a book, I mean, and I still have to go to my orchestration books and check low notes and high notes, and I'm still learning so much all the time, actually. Um, yeah, it's just a really
Is it? Is
laborious
it?
process.
Well, I was about to ask, is it fun? Or is it almost like a hobby where you kind of just, okay, this is what I need to achieve today, or in this period
Yeah.
of time I've got, or does it become, the moments where you just kind of walk off in off and thinking this is going nowhere?
Yeah, no, they definitely are. I'm kind of learning as I get older. I'm learning to sort of trust my instincts more and just do it. And I've spent quite a long time feeling a bit guilty about that, because you always think if something comes easily, you think like, oh, is this too easy, And then if you start to spend ages, I have had times where I've, really mapped out a piece in terms of like exactly what's going to happen where, and you think, am I being too academic? Is this not going to communicate well enough? And you just have to. I just got very good at sort of um, talking to myself, actually, about. I don't know. There's something. I used to have terrible. sort of fear at the beginning of each piece, staring at the blank page and thinking I'm never going to be able to write anything ever again. But I've just kind of drummed into myself that empirically I have done this. And I've done it before and I will be able to do it again. And that seems to have worked actually. Um, I haven't had, touch wood, writer's block for a long time. That's mainly because I don't really have the option. Um, and a lot of it's just very practical. I went through, I've, I went through yesterday. I've got a big piece that I've got to start on Monday, and I've got mm, a bit less time than I would like. And I've gone through my diary and I've counted out the days where I'm actually free, and I've divided the length of this piece by the days I have. So I have a sort of route map in my
Mm.
mind. Um, and I've forgotten what you actually asked now.
Well, it was all about the composition, really. But what about the? Uh, is there a spiritual side to this, Cheryl, for you? Is there the moments where you're, let's say, in the zone and
Hmm.
you've put something down, and you've thought, I'm very feel very blessed that I've had a book published, and I love writing. The idea that you sit at a computer and you write things that weren't there in the morning, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so great. But when it's great, it feels fabulous for me, it does feel spiritual for me.
Yeah.
Just relate that to your work as a musician and composer, Cheryl.
Um, well, does it feel spiritual for me? No, no, it doesn't. But I've I'm a I've got really practiced at allowing my subconscious to do the work. Um, and I'm certainly at my happiest and most content. I mean, there is something, the happiest I am probably is when you are in that flow and things seem to just magically click into place. And that is sort of what makes life worth living for me, I guess.
Mm.
Um, that happens extremely rarely for me, um, but it does occasionally.
Do you see what you do? Do you see it as a gift, Cheryl, or do you see it as a kind of a skill that you've acquired? What would you say to that one?
It's really interesting. Yeah, I guess, I mean, so since I was tiny, I've heard music. I heard music before I was born. Um, so I don't know. It feels really pompous to sort of, I mean, there's certain things that I've been born with. I mean, I've got perfect pitch, for instance. Like, I don't know, is that genetic? I don't know. Actually, my mum sort of got it, but not really. Um, I, I mean, I must be, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
We have to think about it, send the answer on a postcard. It's like
I mean, I do know
I
that,
think it's a gift.
yeah, I mean,
And
yeah. I mean, I've basically, I mean, there's so much training, but I did have a natural aptitude for it. And why did I have a natural aptitude for it? I don't know. Um, is it just because my mother was a musician? I don't know.
yeah, I know my kids, Cheryl, one of my kids, she's 23, and she's got a job, a good job. She's an estate agent, but then she sees, some young woman her age who's kind of conquered the world as a pop star or something. She kind of goes, well, look at her, look at me, how's that happen? And it's that kind of, well, is it a gift? Is it just hard work? What is it? And sometimes
Yeah,
it's just circumstances, isn't it? It is
yeah,
just sometimes circumstances. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm just very lucky to have found what I love doing.
Yeah. One of the things that I watched recently, I love watching Jules Holland later, and he had Luciano Einaudi on, and he was simply asking him to. Uh, Jules was giving him a color, and he's asking him to play the color, it was one of the best things I've seen on telly for it. It's like, so okay, Lucio, give me blue, and what would that look like? And I find it really a piece of magical TV. Do you enjoy that bringing in the light, bringing in the dark, bringing in the grey, bringing in the sun, the yellow?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I have a really clear relationships with color and harmony. I'm not synesthetic. I have a friend who is a composer who really is, but I have a very yeah, it's great fun. I mean, I could never write a Christmas carol which wasn't either based around E minor, G minor, or F major because they're sort of green, red,
Yeah.
and brown, um, or white, C major. Um, yeah, so I have really, and yeah, it's. Oh, I sometimes feel like a bit of a cheat, because I'm writing a piece about. Um, There's this bit in the piece that I've just written for choir and orchestra where the words talk about the sunrise, and it's just so obvious to me that that should either be an F sharp major or A major or a mix of the two. And I think, goodness, am I copping out somehow here? But then I don't know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that is a.
I want to ask you, do you think there's still a lot of music to be discovered, which is in many ways a silly question because of course there is, but you know, people have been playing the piano for centuries, haven't they? And people have been playing the guitar and the drums. What is the kind of is there a holy grail yet to be discovered, do you think, in your career or in terms of music?
I go back and forth. I mean, what I love about my career is that I've got a great deal of variety. So. Um, I wrote a string quartet at the beginning of the year, which was my ivory tower piece. It's me trying to was I trying to be original? I'm not sure as I was actually, but I mean it's me trying to really write me, and I had no restrictions on the players are fantastic. I could write as long as a short piece as I wanted. Um, and then this choir and orchestra piece, a completely different thing. It's for the 20th anniversary of the Royal Scottish National Orchestra's Changed Voices Choir. So it's for boys between 12 and 18 boys are whose voices are changing. So not only do they have a narrow range, but they have an ever-changing range. And this piece is really, the poem was written by Kate Wakeling, was written specially for them about things they wanted to say. And the music was entirely, of course I try and put myself into it, but it's mostly in service of them. It's a giving them something that they will really enjoy singing, that will stretch them in some ways, but not be too difficult that they won't like it. And my main focus is them rather than me making my statement. And then I get to write pieces for, professional choirs and amateur choirs and for kids. And I really like um, the mixture of trying to do all these different things, and I think I'd be bored if I was just trying to write great masterworks all the time.
Mm.
No, I love feeling um, useful. Do I think, I sometimes feel guilty that I'm not always striving to be original. I sometimes feel I'm a bit old hat and a bit, um, but I went to this conference about a month ago, and the film composer David Arnold was there, and he just gave this amazing talk, and he said, the thing I like doing is I like writing music, and so that's what I do, and it makes me happy. Um, and I'm trying to take that approach really, that is there anything new to discover? Um, I mean, I feel as time goes on, I think of composing as like distillation. I really want to, like, if I want to sort of pack an emotional punch, I kind of want to distill it ever more. So, is there something extra I can do with that harmony or that rhythm, or um, and can I improve my craft? Like when you're doing various things, it's like, I guess it's like anything. It's like exercise. If you do one kind of exercise all the time, the muscles that you're not using get flabby, right? And you have to, it's like if you're if I'm writing a whole load of short songs, does my ability to write a half-hour piece with a really coherent structure,
Mhm.
I need to sort of swat up on that. And um, I feel I've been writing a bit too much too continuously recently, and I do worry that I'm just on sort of autopilot a bit. But on the other hand, that's a good thing, right? I mean, one can navel gaze too much, I think. So I spent so much of my life being so neurotic, that I'm really trying really hard to think, okay, it's going all right, just
Mm.
carry on. As long as I'm happy with what I'm doing, and most importantly, performers are happy with what I'm doing, then I just really try and sort of talk to myself and
I
yeah,
think
not worry about any of that stuff, I guess. Yeah.
no. Well, a good philosophy, I think.
Yeah.
Cheryl, I've loved chatting. I love talking about music. Is there, in your, in a historical world full of great composers, is there one at the pinnacle for you as a final question?
Um, yeah, I think it would predictably, I think it would be Bach. I think. Um, Anybody else?
Why Bach?
It's just it's just so often so technically perfect and so moving. Um, and so inventive. That's the reason that I love Benjamin Britten, actually. I think that for me, I don't know whether he'd be the composer I would pick if I had only one composer in the whole of the world. I think it would be Bach. Um, but that mixture of craft, that mixture of craft, emotion, um, yeah, yeah. That's sort of all I aspire to do, really.
Fabulous. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for coming on. I hope people have enjoyed listening to this conversation. If you have, there are lots of musicians from all walks of life, from drummers to violinists, rock stars, everybody. So, Cheryl, thanks for coming on, and hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been great. Thank you for asking me.